don't think much about the big war anymore, the one they call the second one, because the small wars that came after it seem a lot bigger now than the big war was. Most people today look back at the big one with sort of fond memories. It was, in a sense, an okay war. We knew why we were fighting it, and we felt pretty proud of ourselves for being in it. We liked the songs, we liked the uniforms, we liked the girls, we liked that everyone liked us. So looking back, it really was one of your better wars. Except if you were just a kid, a year out of high school, heading south in a troop train, knowing that in 2 months you'd be in some mud hole fighting for your life.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies, and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of coloniabook.com, and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Book and Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
So we are in January, and if you were brand new, maybe you just joined us last week, and you're like, I didn't know Biloxi Blues was a book. It wasn't. Here's the thing. So when the pandemic started, we decided to do a brand new episode every single week. And that means we've expanded what we mean by book. In this case, we're using it in the theatrical sense to mean a play. And in January, we're going to do all non-musical plays that have been adapted into films. We started off with a bang last week with Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And today we have the same director, but a very, very different playwright. And we'll be talking about that pretty soon. But in case you're new, and you have suggestions for books and movies or plays and movies, adaptations that you think we should cover, there's a few places where you can make those suggestions. You can meet other listeners of this podcast and interact with us on the internet.
Yes, you could find us on Facebook, Book vs. Movie Podcast. We have a basic Facebook page. We also have a private Facebook group. And in the Facebook group, we're much more interactive, and the members are very interactive, always giving ideas for books and movies. We also have done, like you said, plays, short stories, magazine articles, songs, poems, anything that's been adapted as a literary source into a movie. We are on Twitter and Instagram, Book versus Movie, and in those places you spell all the words out. And we have an old-timey email, Book versus Movie Podcast, spell that all out, at gmail.com. You can send us your suggestions there, or if you would like some stickers, we will drop some stickers in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and you'd like to help keep us in books and movies, you can support us on Patreon. And Margot, we have a new Patreon supporter, do we not?
We do indeed. Patricia, thank you so much for joining our Patreon page. Patreon. We're putting all of our episodes from 2020 and previous to that out there. It's going to be actually moving in on 2021. We're going to keep 2 years worth of shows. We've been doing this for 9 years, and we just put behind the paywall Double Indemnity, just some other ones in case you're interested. Age of Innocence, Tuck Everlasting, Road to Perdition, Dead Zone, Big Sleep, Valley of the Dolls, The Exorcist, The Help. All of those are on our Patreon wall. And it helps us just with like the hosting costs. Also for the streaming, I forgot to mention with the streaming, the movies have to be streaming on a major app in order for us to also cover the movie. If it's on some DVD that we can get only in Canada or something, it's just not going to work out for us. And so thank you so much to Patricia for doing that for us. If, money is tight, we totally understand that. If you could just leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, that would be amazing, including iTunes. And if you leave us a 5-star review in iTunes, we'll mention you on the air.
That's right. And we really appreciate your support, however it comes our way.
Right.
Now, today we're talking about a very big figure in American theater. And even if you've never seen any of his works on stage, you have almost certainly seen adaptations of his work on the big screen and the little screen. I was a big fan of The Odd Couple television show when I was a kid. But he was also, Neil Simon is such a huge influence. I remember seeing Biloxi Blues in the movie theater, I think, when it came out. I didn't remember very much about this movie. Watching it this time around, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And I forgot that guy's in this movie. We have a lot to discuss about a work of his this is not, when people talk about the main, like, big juggernauts of Neil Simon, this is not one that usually comes up. But it's an interesting one, especially when we're talking about adaptation from the original theatrical book to the movie. But let's touch on, in case somebody hasn't been with us before, let's talk a little bit about Mr. Neil Simon.
Talked about him over the summer for Barefoot in the Park. He was born 1927. He's from the Bronx. He was raised in the Bronx. He graduated high school early at 16. He went to NYU. There's a Neil Simon Theater that is named for Neil Simon in New York City, and he's actually performed shows in his own theater that's named after him. That's
really something.
He has won Pulitzer Prizes. He is a brand in and of itself. Like Neil Simon people that know Neil Simon are interested in his plays. They're like, well, it's going to be funny. It's going to be clever, at least. Like if nothing else, he's known for having just great jokes and a great premise in his stories. This is the Eugene trilogy that we're talking about today. So in the mid 80s, he, like we said, he did Barefoot in the Park. I'll just read some more. There's The Odd Couple. At one time he had Barefoot in the Park, The Odd Couple, Sweet Charity, and The Star-Spangled Girl, all 4 shows at the same time on Broadway. And this is in 1966 to 67.
It's unheard of.
Right.
I mean, this is like maybe Andrew Lloyd Webber. Maybe
it's that level. I mean,
yeah.
There's also The Gingerbread Lady. There's The Prisoner on Second Avenue. There's also theater movies.
Goodbye Girl.
Which I love. That's like
me too.
That's
love Goodbye Girl.
That's my feel good movie when I have the blues. The Last of the Red Hot Lovers. I mean, there's just The Cheap Detective, The Heartbreak Kid, The Out of Towners. So many here. And then he worked on a movie called Max Dugan Returns, and his star was Matthew Broderick, which I just remember. It's an early 80s movie. And he was going to write, he was more being very autobiographical, and he wrote, his first one was Brighton Beach Memoirs. And it's, like I said, the Eugene Jerome trilogy. And it's sort of mainly about him with some other facts mixed in. Eugene Jerome is actually from Brooklyn, not the Bronx. And he just talks about living with multiple family members. Woody Allen's done some similar things too. It's what it was like to be in New York City, World War II era. Before that, what's it like to grow up, in Far Rockaway, and what's it like in Brighton Beach, and what's it like to be a writer and want to be a writer.
Very interesting. I mean, considering there are so many of his works that are basically about this, there's 3 about the specific character,
right,
of Eugene, but you can look at things like Lost in Yonkers, and they're very similar characters and family dynamics, but he always kind of puts a new spin on it.
Yes.
And it doesn't feel like, oh, here's this family again. Oh, they're in New York. Here we go. It's always a very interesting new perspective on this American family idea and dynamic, with, as you said, like a lot of great jokes, just super. I mean, he was one of these Sid Caesar guys that could like Mel Brooks, that could just rattle off the jokes, just like a machine gun. Unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's stories you've heard before, but he tells them so well. And Jonathan Silverman plays the character of Eugene Jerome in the movie, but Matthew Broderick played him on Broadway. And Matthew Broderick, I remember because I lived in New York at the time. I was in high school when this came out. Brighton Beach Memoirs and then Biloxi Blues. He was a star on Broadway as a teenager.
As a teenager,
20,
he was
21 at the time.
Oh, I think so. But he was a major
Right.
theater way before we ever knew him in the movies. He was a humongous star on the stage. Did you ever see that? Ethel Fugard is the playwright. Takes place in South Africa. Master Something and the Boys.
No.
It's about this young man, who's Matthew Broderick. He's a boy. And these two, it takes place in South Africa, and it's these 2 grown men who are black, and they work in a diner. It's so good. The writing is so beautiful. And he's just an amazing theater actor.
I've seen him several times.
Just
many different shows. He's always great.
He's really
He has so much charisma.
Yeah.
He's so funny. He does a double take like just as good as anybody. Like
that's
just
true. That's
it's
true.
So clever. So,
having said that, I do think that Jonathan Silverman is really great
sure.
in Brighton Beach Memoirs. I think, because you have this one character, as we were saying. So he wrote this trilogy. It's an autobiographical trilogy. His character is called Eugene Jerome. 3 different actors playing in the 3 different movies. But I think, Jonathan Silverman plays him in Brighton Beach Memoirs, the first one, where he's much younger. He's great. I think it's a
So
really
funny.
good performance. But I thought wonderful choice, of course, for Biloxi Blues, which we're going to talk about today, to have the guy who originated the role on stage to also do the role in the film. He was still plenty young to play that role. But as we were just saying before we got on the air, I didn't realize, and I read this play in college. I remember reading it in college. I remember seeing the movie whenever it was that it came. I was in high school when it came out. So I saw the movie before I read the play. There's a lot of differences between the play and the movie, and I don't understand why. Like usually we're like, oh, well, we get it. You know, it's a different format. There's certain things you can do on the stage that you can't do on the screen and vice versa. I kind of don't get the choices that are made. We also were just saying how Siskel and Ebert, who were the be all end all when it came to the American public's, learning about movies and what was good and what was not good. They hated this movie. I mean, they hated it so much that they were it kind of seems like they're getting off on hating it so much. Like they're just like one-upping each other on who can diss the movie more. And certain criticisms, I agree. But first of all, we just talked about Mike Nichols when we talked about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is a brilliant adaptation of a very, very popular play. This play also did extremely well on stage. So it's a similar scenario. I don't know if this is the first time that they worked together, but I do know that Neil Simon had originally wanted Mike Nichols to direct The Goodbye Girl.
Oh, okay.
So Nichols was his original choice. And I don't remember what happened that it didn't end up being Mike Nichols. So they certainly knew each other and were kind of around each other, worked in the same circles and so on. Great choice. I don't understand a lot of the direction in this movie. I'm puzzled by it, but let's talk about the play, because the play, it's okay. I'm gonna just to echo what Siskel. Here's some of the things that Siskel and Ebert points that they made that I agree with. Number one, it's a story at this point that we had seen many, 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 many times. Young man gets drafted into World War II. He's fish out of water. He's at boot camp. He's having to learn how to adjust to the Army life. Falls in love with the girl, but of course he's going off to war, so they can't really be together. And it's, at the end, it's like, well, it's all because, I'm nostalgic for that time because we were so young and we had our whole lives ahead of us, basically. And yes, this is a thing that we had seen so many times in so many forms. But in talking strictly about the theatrical version, of course, Neil Simon is doing this. He's giving us a similar thing that we've seen before, as he often does, but he has a completely new perspective and a new spin on it, which I think is really clever and fresh. I think even when you read it today, reading that play script, it's really fresh sounding still.
Right. I mean, this whole nobody can do, because they mentioned at the time in the 80s, after the Vietnam War, in the 80s, there were so many movies about the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. Russia's going to come get us. We need to have a strong military, but it's also this, we need to treat our veterans better, from Vietnam to we need to remember the sacrifices that were made in World War II. There aren't as many World War I movies, but there's a lot of Civil War movies that also came out. Glory is popping into my head. There were so many that came out. And the thing I'm thinking of, there's the movie that they compare it to, which is Stanley Kubrick's 87, Vincent D'Onofrio.
Full Metal Jacket?
Yes. Which they're comparing it to that. We had Full Metal Jacket. I'm like, that's not the story. What do you it's carrying, it's like comparing Pretty Woman to Casablanca. They
get very carried away with their criticism.
They really want to, they pile on the haterade.
True.
Let's talk a little more.
There's some valid points, but let's just talk about I wanted to talk about the trilogy. And one of the things about this trilogy that made it so special and made it so fresh and interesting was he employs this thing in the script. And I'm bringing it up because you really don't see it in this movie at all. And I think that's the main thing that is bugging me about this movie. In this trilogy, the character of Eugene, throughout the whole thing, he breaks the fourth wall. and talks to the audience. Like, it's kind of mostly that. It's mostly him engaging directly with the audience. And then the scenes are his memory that he's sharing with you, the audience, in this one-on-one conversation that he's having with you. It's not, I'm watching a movie about a bunch of guys going off to war. Oh, and one of them kind of keeps turning around and talking to me. It's very much kind of like a one-man show where the character of Eugene is coming out and he's talking directly to you. And as he's remembering things, these scenes are playing out kind of like almost literally in the background as he's talking to you. That's what makes this trilogy, like I said, so fresh feeling and so interesting, is that crackle between this main guy and you, the person sitting in the seat in the theater. And that's a very difficult thing to capture on screen, of course.
Right.
There's certain ways that you can do that. But what it makes me think of is one great example of it working really well, Ferris Bueller. Mm-hmm. Ferris Bueller does exactly that. And that's exactly the same device that they use, that John Hughes uses in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, of Matthew Broderick talking directly into the film. And so you and he are in on this. You and he are having a conversation, having a relationship about this stuff that's going on in his life. So that's what I think this play is so, what makes it so exciting and doesn't seem so much like, oh, here's another story about a fish out of water city boy going to the South and he's in basic training and, has to hup to and all that kind of stuff. And of course the jokes, great jokes.
I would argue. So the first play, Brighton Beach Memoirs, it's definitely Eugene is our center point. Everything is done through his eyes. He's talking about the past and including us in his memories of his parents, of his family. I love the relationship between him and his brother in that movie, in that play. It's
very much about that.
Very much.
Yeah. That is the what do you want to call that? The catalyst. That's the inciting incident. It's him really telling a story about his brother. He's telling you, he's sharing with you, Eugene is. He's telling a story about his brother. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And then in this one,
it's more of, Eugene's kind of a background player. It's more about.
He's just telling you about it.
Arnold Epstein, I would argue, and
absolutely
is the main character, or is somebody that, because, and this is what I like about this, is that I feel like he, and also Sergeant Merwin J. Toomey, William Sadler. Let me just, I'll read the cast of the play. So it was William Sadler as Merwin J. Toomey, Barry Miller. We talked about Barry Miller when we talked about Saturday Night Fever, which is going to be going by the Patreon wall, y'all, soon. So keep that in mind. Randall Edwards played Rowena. She was a soap opera actress. Penelope Ann Miller plays Daisy. Matt Mulhern plays Bukowski, and he also plays him in the movie. Speaking of Ferris Bueller, Alan Ruck plays Carney, the singer, semi-singer. We have Jeffrey Sharp, as Hennessy, and Brian Tarantina as Roy Selridge. Tarantina was also in Marvelous Mrs. Maisels. He was the club owner, the one that gives Midge her start.
Yeah, that's right. Now, this is a great cast. Of course, this is Neil Simon at the height of his Neil Simon-ness.
Right.
In a play about Neil Simon. It's with people who are handpicked by Neil Simon to tell the story.
I remember
it must have been amazing.
In the 80s, I remember I had friends that would go and see. My dad tried to get me tickets for Biloxi Blues before we moved to California, and I was desperate to go, but we just couldn't get them. They were just sold out. Brighton Beach Memoirs was such a hit. Matthew Broderick became a huge star in New York. So 2 years later, they bring out this play. So they already had an audience there. And also, the writer's been writing for 30 years at this point. But I feel like Neil Simon is really addressing the fact that he's not perfect, that he was a very imperfect human. He's somebody that grew up Jewish in New York, in Brooklyn. He never really met anybody
around everybody else who was like him.
Right. So it was very difficult for him to hear people. Obviously, it would be being anti-Semitic and saying horrible things. And our character with Barry Miller played is the person that has the most integrity of anybody there, the smartest of anybody there. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he has a nervous stomach. At the same time, he just has these way of...
He's small. He's puny compared
Very
to the
small.
other guys.
Nebbishy.
I really like the dynamic of all the different men. I also appreciate the acknowledgement that we're looking at an all-white cast because guess what? The troops were segregated.
Right.
So, and like not like actually addressing that. I really appreciate that he actually addresses that. And yet that doesn't mean that these two particular men in the what do you want to call them, in the outfit, in the unit, are still subject to discrimination and
openly
prejudice openly. Yeah, no problem. Because it was totally fine to totally talk about all that stuff. Just like the first one was about his brother, this one is definitely about his friend Arnold, right? Arnold
Epstein.
Arnold Epstein. And how, as you say, like we learn in Brighton Beach Memoirs that he wants to be a writer. And so it's, as this whole trilogy is about his journey to that. And in the next play, Broadway Bound, he really starts to get his foothold in as a writer. But here, he's figuring out like, oh man, like when you write something down.
Yeah.
People actually pay attention to that, which is the thing that we learn now in the internet, the day of the internet, that like, posting a thing online, it's the same thing as like writing it. You're writing it down and you're creating a record.
Right.
And so, we don't always understand the power of the things that we say, especially when we write them down and make a record of them.
Right.
I mean, it's just, I really love it. I think the play does a really good job. It's a pretty spare set. Right. It's not overly produced from what I could tell, and at least in the description. A lot of it is done in your imagination, which is par for the course with the theater. Like when he dances with Daisy and all of it. When he's with the what's the name of Rowena. I think it's all done super well. But it's your mind, the audience, your mind is filling in the sets and the backdrop. But again, throughout the entire thing, he is turning to you and saying, and like talking about like what's going on and how he felt about it. And he's engaged with you in a really direct way. And so the other thing I don't understand is a lot of the story points are the same, but once you get to the last like quarter of the story of the piece, the theater script and the film are so different.
Yeah.
I don't get why.
Well,
I don't understand why.
Barry Miller as Arnold Epstein in the play, he and William Sadler, who's Toomey, and Sadler plays him very yelling and your typical army sergeant, screaming,
drill sergeant.
Drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to whip their asses into shape. I mean, they're trying to. Yeah, that's
they're
going to
go off to war. They need to like not die.
Right. He's got to get them going. So they have that dynamic, whereas he's constantly questioning, why is this man doing it this particular way? Because he's super rational and he's in his head. And it's funny because there's times where Eugene doesn't stick up for him when they're saying things, or when there's a homophobia that exists in the air, and he even says like, it bothers me that it bothers me.
Why didn't I say anything?
Why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I put? And we can all feel that way. We've all made that mistake, and so it's very human, and it's nice to see it. And then at the very end of the play, Toomey is going to be sent out to a VA hospital, so his career is going to be over, and he calls in Epstein, drunk and with a gun in his hand. And so that last scene that, we'll talk about the movie in a second, but the last scene is Epstein and Toomey.
Epstein and Toomey.
With that scene. And then, so this is my theory. And I did some research about Barry Miller won a Tony for his performance. Matthew Broderick won it 2 years before playing Eugene, but he was nominated, but he didn't win here. He won the Drama Desk Award. There was a whole story about him in the New York Times about him and William Sadler and how they worked out their relationship, and they improv to get it to work on the set. Barry Miller got a lot of press and a lot of attention, and like I said, won the Tony Award. So 3 years later,
the role is written. The story is about that character,
right? I think Matthew Broderick, especially because he made Ferris Bueller's Day Off in '86. I'm a movie star. You're going to make this movie and I'm going to be in it. I need to have the best lines. Barry Miller was not asked to be in the movie.
No, he's not in it.
My name is Danny Aiello, and I'm the king of the Bronx. And I'm also on Broadway in Hurly Burly. The nominees for Outstanding Featured Actor in a Play are Charles S. Dutton for his compelling trumpet player in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. William Hurt for his misanthropic casting director in Hurly Burly. Barry Miller for his uncompromising Jewish intellectual in Biloxi Blues. And Edward Petterbridge for his asexual novelist in Strange Interlude. And the winner is Barry Miller in Biloxi Blues.
Oh, I thought I was nervous on opening night. First, I would like to thank, I have several people to thank. First, my mother, who encouraged me my whole life to be a fighter and to stand up for my convictions. I'd like to thank my cast, a very talented and hardworking ensemble, and this is a double honor to be singled out of that group of people. I'd like to thank Mr. Eugene Sachs, who really brought out the best that I had to offer. And to Manny Eisenberg, who's always telling me to lighten up and have a lot of fun. I am. But mostly I'd like to thank Mr. Neil Simon, because besides writing a very funny play, he also wrote a play of great feeling and beauty and compassion and dignity, and trusted me with a character that embodies those ideals, and for that I will always be grateful. He is a wonderful and generous man, and I owe this to him. Thank you very much.
Everybody talks about him before.
The play makes so much more sense with the scene that way. I mean, the story. It's so weird. It's just a weird choice.
And
like,
also,
what?
So two other things. It's set in 1943 in the play. That's right when America's... Yeah.
Yes.
The danger is real.
Thank you. The danger is super real. And so that's the other thing that's very different is at the end of the play and also the movie, there's this whole little segment where Eugene tells you what becomes of each of the men. Most of them don't make it.
No.
Most of them are killed, are injured, and it wrecks their lives. Almost all of them have a trauma that they have to live with for the rest of their lives. And the character of Eugene, when he's shipped off, as soon as he lands in like Britain or whatever, he gets injured in like a Jeep accident or something. And so he can't fight. And instead he goes and writes for the Stars and Stripes. And that's what kicks off his writing career. That's how the play ends. For some reason in the movie, everybody gets a happy ending.
Well, let's talk about the movie in a sec.
Including America.
Right. Well, let's talk about, let me just finish. Like, I'll read to you some of them. Because the whole thing also, he wants to be a writer, he wants to lose his virginity, and he wants to fall in love. Those are like
correct. Those are his three objectives.
So
for boot camp.
Right. And there's more with Daisy in this play about her father.
There's a lot.
Yeah. And Rowena, I think, is more interesting. I think they really lean up the script. And I normally don't have a problem with that. I like a movie that's like an hour, 37 minutes. That's perfect for me. But so let me hear. So this is like what happens to some of them. He says, Ray Seldridge served in every campaign in France, was eventually made a sergeant, and he makes his troop do 300 push-ups a day. Bukowski was wounded at Arnhem by a mortar shell. He lost his right leg straight up to the hip. He didn't win the Medal of Honor. Don Carney, after 6 months of constant attack by enemy fire, was hospitalized for severe depression and neurological disorders. Arnold Epstein was listed as missing in action, and his body was never traced to be found. I mean, those are intense ways to leave a show.
Yeah.
I mean, at that time.
Yeah.
And then, it's like I said, it gets in the middle of the action. Like,
you're watching, and you've just been through this little story with all of these young men, again, who seem to have their whole lives ahead of them. You know, because of this war, all of those lives are derailed in one way or another. And the thing about Eugene is his life also gets derailed, but in a positive way. And he has feelings about that too. He feels guilty about that, he says.
Yeah.
Which I don't think he says in the movie. That's such a different message.
Yes. Well, let's do this. We'll take a quick break and we'll play the original trailer. And the trailer got me to want to see the movie. I mean, this movie is jokes. I mean, it's super funny.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so let's play that original trailer.
Boy, it's hot. This is hot. Never got this hot in Brooklyn. This is like Africa hot. Tarzan couldn't take this kind of hot.
I'd like you to answer when your name is called. The answer to that question is ho. Do I make myself clear, Jerome?
Ho, yes.
Ho, what?
Ho, nothing.
You having trouble understanding me, Jerome?
Ho, no. I mean, no ho, Sergeant. It's just plain ho.
You're embarrassing me in front of the lizards and the buzzards. What would you do if the Japanese army was behind you?
Surrender and get some sleep.
Okay, honey, do your stuff. Careful, you got your knee on my stomach.
I'm sorry.
Didn't anyone ever teach you anything?
Well, my brother showed me a few things. You look a lot different than my brother. Saw this stuff in the Bronx Zoo once. Gorillas were throwing it at each other.
Guess we have to look for another way around, man. Epstein, reassemble Jerome's weapon. Deep shit, Epstein. How deep would you say he was in, Jerome?
About up to here.
So as Margot says, we have Mike Nichols as our director, and I'm just going to go through the cast really quick. Matthew Broderick as Eugene Morris Jerome. Christopher Walken, who I think this is a fabulous change.
Agree. Great
There's
choice.
no other Toomey
terrific.
like this Toomey. And
No,
just this
he's
sergeant.
really super good.
Marcus Flanagan as Selridge, who's great. He's just this doofus of a guy. Matt Mulhern as Wachowski, who's like this bully.
They're like what they call mouth breathers.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Mouth breathers. We didn't get Barry Miller. We have Corey Parker as Arnold Epstein. His mother, by the way, was married to Dr. Dreamy, Patrick Dempsey. That was his first wife.
Interesting.
Yeah, his friend's mother. Anyway, Casey Giamasco, he's Carney. Michael Dolan as Hennessy. Penelope Ann Miller as Daisy. That's reprises her role from Broadway. And then Park Overall as Rowena, who I think is excellent.
She's great in this. She truly is.
funny.
Yeah. And we should also mention Corey Parker, who plays Epstein, who is, I think, the standout of it's a really good cast.
Yeah.
Just all the way around. It is such a solid cast. It truly is. Corey Parker plays Eugene in the last film installment in the trilogy of Broadway Bound. So in the film version of the trilogy, we have Jonathan Silverman, then Matthew Broderick, and then Corey Parker playing the character of Eugene Jerome at these different times of his life. In the stage version, it's Matthew Broderick, and I forget who plays Eugene in Broadway Bound on stage.
It's Jonathan Silverman.
Oh, yeah. So something about these guys.
Yeah. Neil Simon likes them.
Mr. Simon felt something there. I think the casting is the best thing about this film. These guys are great. they're great. Again, I just have so many questions.
So I
don't
only
get
saw
it.
the movie, and that the movie was my version of Biloxi Blues, and also Brighton Beach Memoirs, by the way. I hadn't seen either one.
yeah.
So to me, I was like, well, this is the story. You know, it was
Yeah.
very surprising to me. So I should mention, I got on Audible. There's a Neil Simon collection there where there's all these plays that you can listen to. So to listen to this, how it was originally produced versus now. So we set the action now in 1945. We know as an audience,
It's the end.
yeah, by June, it's going to be all
These guys may never go to war.
right.
Yeah.
So they're going to they were in Fort Dix, and now they're going to be in Biloxi, Mississippi. Mm-hmm. It's hot. I mean, and also this movie is stupid funny, and it gives you time and
Super
place
good jokes.
very well. And the jokes are great, and the music's great.
I agree. The music is very good.
Music is
Yes.
excellent. I feel like I'm there and I'm a part of it. I think Christopher Walken, when he shows up and he's just like, "Hi, how you doing?"
Hi. How are you? Good to see you. Hello, soldier. Hello.
Hi, Sarge.
Detail, attention. Sorry, men. Perhaps I didn't make myself clear. Detail. 10 hut. Good. Good. At ease, gentlemen. My name is Toomey. Sergeant Merwin J. Toomey. And I'm in charge of this platoon during your 10 weeks of basic training here in beautiful Biloxi, Mississippi. After which, you'll be sent to some shit island in the Pacific or some turd pile in northern Sicily. In either case, returning to your mamas and papas with your balls intact is highly improbable. I speak from experience, having served 14 months in the North African campaign, where 73% of my comrades are buried. Having donated a small portion of my brains to this conflict, the other portion being protected by a heavy steel plate in my head.
You're like, I'm so scared.
Right. And then his is a great reveal because it's just gradually you realize like
It's a slow burn.
it's a slow burn.
Yeah.
Like he's tough. He's going to make you do push-ups or he's going to teach you a lesson. And that's like how you do it. Like when you want a group to work together. So Corey Parker, I think he's really good.
He's
Arnold
wonderful in this
Epstein.
role.
Yeah.
He is absolutely wonderful in this role. Everybody is great. I love every single one of these guys. I think the performances are super good and definitely worth seeing the movie just for that. But here's the thing.
Right.
You know, we talked about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and to me, you know, when we're looking at the play versus the movie, the genius of Mike Nichols in producing that play for the screen is taking advantage of all of the cinematic tools that he has of it, making it black and white. All of the unusual camera angles and the way that he uses close-ups and deep focus and shallow focus, the locations that he has chosen that don't exist in the script at all. You know, everything's all taking place on the one set, of course. And the way that he, you know, takes that story and fleshes it out for a film audience. It's just so, as we said last week, it is a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. He's not doing that here, like at all. Yes, we have other locations, but it's not, the locations aren't contributing as a character the way they do in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Like that house is a character. Mm-hmm. When they're out on the two men are out in the dark on the, you know, on the grass and they're drunk, like that whole scenario. And the roadhouse is adds its own character. Somehow the way that this is shot, it doesn't quite get us there to that level. Art direction is awesome. Costumes, awesome. No qualms. Love the music. The lighting seems good. I don't understand why we're not getting as many of those like close-ups and interesting angles between. There's very few close-ups. It's a lot of long shots, like we're looking as if we're looking at it on a stage set. And I don't know that that's helping. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Things out, and I can't even remember every single thing.
There's a lot of stuff that they took out, and then again, I don't understand why. First of all, why are we at the end of the war? And we maybe have a reason why it's Matthew Broderick who's being held at gunpoint instead of Corey Parker, which would have been so cool. I would have loved to have seen that scene, and it's still good, and they're still both acting the crap out of that scene. It's a great scene, but it doesn't hit the same.
No, once I learned that it was different, that it was Arnold Epstein, and then I read somewhere that supposedly Matthew Broderick didn't, like I said, want to bring Barry Miller. I think Matthew Broderick probably leaned in and said, then I want to be in that scene, because that's the scene everybody talks about.
Because that's the scene
that
everybody talks about.
And
Absolutely.
It's an acting. I've looked on YouTube. There are a lot of actors that have made that their real.
It's a scene study,
right?
Yeah, if you take an acting class, like you might see that if some two guys get paired up together, one's big, one's small,
right?
Probably you're going to see Mice and Men, and you're going to see this scene.
Exactly, because both the parts are really good and really interesting.
Meaty parts in this scene. Everybody has good lines. Yeah, I don't like that it's him swooping in and like taking the place of Epstein and then like kind of handing over the victory to Epstein, as opposed to Epstein really being,
brave
at gunpoint.
Right.
His integrity is so solid, but then, he doesn't get to live out his whole adult life. We don't know. He doesn't get to be an adult with that integrity. And what a loss that is. When you leave the play, you're like, oh my gosh, what a loss. What a terrible, terrible loss of promise of each of these men, except for Eugene. And then the movie, like everybody has a freaking happy ending.
Yeah. I mean,
so what's my takeaway? I don't know.
I'm trying to remember.
Wasn't World War II awesome?
Yeah, well, I think because we were so, we've done so many Vietnam movies, and they're always such a bummer. And of course they
really
are,
were.
because war
is terrible.
War is terrible, and that's our generation of like the adults protesting that, or parents being in that war and that kind of thing. So maybe people just wanted a war you could feel good. And he mentions it several times. It's a war you could feel good about.
Yeah, but in the play, he says that at the beginning, but then of course at the end.
Right.
It's still a war. Right.
Well, and that's right. The whole scene. I love the betting scene.
You're next. Okay. I always wanted to make it with a world famous woman. Somebody that nobody could have in this country but me. I'd be the only American to have it.
Have you someone in mind?
Yeah, I got someone in mind.
I think we're heading for an A+. Who's the woman, Kowski?
The Queen of England.
Queen of England? Oh,
that is disgusting. It's like making it with your own grandmother.
Well, for a whole week.
Maybe we stop for tea and crumpets.
Apes and gorillas. I'm living with apes and gorillas.
Come on, what's his score? Give him his score. Yes, give the Earl of Meatloaf his score.
This is a tough one. I find it completely unredeeming in every way. Morally, ethically, and sexually. But it's got style. A-.
A-? You're sick, Jerome. You give the highest score to the guy who humps the mother of the British Empire?
Hey, so I'm winning, right?
Not yet. There's 2 more to go.
Epstein's next. I want to hear what his last week on Earth would be like. Probably wants to take an English exam at City College.
Hurry up. They're blowing retreat. Come on, Arnold. It's your last week on Earth. What's your secret desire?
I don't want to say it. If I say it, it might not come true.
I know. He wants to pass gas. He wants to bend over and blow up the whole world.
Will you give him a chance, please? He has one. What is it, Arnold? What's the last thing you want to do on this Earth?
I would like to make Sergeant Merwin J. Toomey do 200 push-ups in front of this platoon.
That's good. I hate to admit it, but it's good.
It's all right. 500 would have been better.
I think it's terrific. A+.
Ooh!
A+, you're crazy. Now you can't win.
I could still tie him.
But if it's a tie, all bets are off. Nobody wins.
Fair enough. Somebody else has to judge me. Wachowski, pick a judge.
Okay, sure, I pick Selridge.
I love it. No matter what crap he says he gets an A+, your money is safe, boys.
Retreat means lights out. Never had to do push-ups in bed before. I could start tonight.
So what are you doing your last week on Earth?
I would lose my virginity, win the Pulitzer Prize for Literature, and fall in love with the perfect girl.
Why don't you score the winning touchdown for Notre Dame while you're at it? Give him a score, Roy, so we can take our money back.
I give him a C-.
What?
Hey, I'm not gonna let him beat me with that pissy story. I came up with something hot. I'm not giving him an A+ for falling in love. Why doesn't he go home and visit Annie's family? Because you're a moron! You go look on the train and see you drop your brain.
It's so sweet.
It's so sweet, but
Like,
what
these
led to
guys-
it? It's Arnold Epstein
We're
says
gonna
if
die.
we're going to die. There's 6 of us here. 4 of us are going to die. That's the odds.
Right.
And that's why he says, okay, then let's make this game. And it
Right.
feels more real because, yeah, that could definitely. And now it's.
Yeah, but when you see in the movie, because we know it's 1945, we know those aren't the odds.
Right.
The audience knows there's a good chance they're all going to be fine. And that's very different. That's
Yeah.
very different. Now it's a sappy, like, what? It's like a Beetle Bailey cartoon or something. It's like, it's not, it doesn't have any of the urgency and the tragedy and the loss of you know, what war robs us of. You know, it doesn't make you think about any of that. And that's what the whole play is about.
It's the whole play is about that. And I didn't know that. So when I saw the
Yeah.
movie, I was like, well, this is what the story is.
Same, because I had seen the movie first as well.
Yeah, and I like the movie. Trust me, I like this movie, and I'll see this movie again. It's a great movie.
It's very funny. It's got the writing is excellent. The acting is so good. There are no weak links in the cast.
No. And when they go to the brothel, I think that's a great scene.
They're great. All of them. I love all of them in that scene. Yeah.
I
but
peaked too early. He's in there like 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's so cute. The takeaway, though, is just so, it's like antithetical to the original material. I don't understand why.
I don't understand either.
I could even forgive like the Matthew Broderick is in the scene with Toomey instead of Epstein if we had the same end. We had the same end. Some of these guys are dead. Some of these guys are wounded in a way that's going to completely have changed the trajectory of their lives. I turned out kind of okay. And you know what? I sort of feel bad about that.
Yeah, I can't stop thinking about it.
That's the takeaway of the play.
Right.
Yeah, I can't stop thinking about it. So guess what? I wrote this play about it.
But
the movie doesn't have any of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
It is.
It's sort of like a Hogan's Heroes kind of thing.
Yeah. You never fear. I mean, there's some moments like they're in a movie theater and they see what's going on in Bataan and which is in the Philippines and what's happening there. And that's a great scene. There's also Hennessy, the whole thing about him being homosexual.
Oh, that is okay. I have to say, like that, I think is done so well in this movie. And I think this is the one instance where I can point to, I liked it better in the movie than I did on the original, in the original production. And it's just because of all those actors are just so great that by the time you get to that point in the script and you see Toomey like going through on the Jeep, on the back of the Jeep, and you're like, oh gosh. Yeah, I have to give it to them, both the movie and the play. That again, they do address the segregation, the racism, the anti-Semitism, the homophobia, and how real and just like a part of your everyday life that was. I think that scene is spectacular. That whole section of the movie is so well done. Because in the play, you're hearing about it third hand. Oh, they caught these two guys, so now we got to find and in the movie, you see that, just a flash of that moment of them, and you're like, what's going on? Why are they upset at this one? And you don't understand. And the way that that little story unfolds, I think, is extremely well done in the movie. And I would say that it's better than it is on stage. And especially like that scene where they go, because in the play, Toomey comes into the barracks and says, I'm going to call the guy, and he calls the name, and the guy gets out of his bunk where they're all just in their bunks. The guy gets out of his bunk and goes with Toomey. But the way that they did it in the movie with Toomey, like surveying all of the men, and Christopher Walken, like you see that he doesn't want to have to do this.
Right.
He doesn't have a choice but to do this. And he's not taking advantage of that moment to humiliate Hennessy, to make an example of him in front of the other men. He's just taking care of this duty. He has no choice but to do it. His feelings about it, he can't enter into it. And so he's just going to get it done and move on.
Right.
And I love the way that scene is done in the movie. I think that's maybe my favorite part of the whole thing. I think that's the one segment that is better than the play.
I agree. And also there's just more for Daisy to do. She's just more of a person.
Yeah.
In the play.
Yeah. It's a little better that way, I think. Yeah.
We just have we have an extra scene with her, and she's just talking about her life, and she's well read, and she's super smart, and she keeps him on his toes and all that. I like the fact that he goes back to Rowena and she doesn't remember him. And that was for him. That was like, wow, I'm not going to pay for this anymore because it just cheapens. But he's growing up. He's growing up and he's learning things. I still would give it like an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. I think it's a really good movie.
Why? Just tell me why. It's my job.
You listen to me, you fly speck. You're taking me on, aren't you? I have a nutcracker that crunches the testicles of men that take me on. How the hell do you think you can beat me?
I'm not trying to beat you. I just don't think it's necessary to dehumanize a man in order to get him to perform. You can get better results raising our spirits than lowering our dignity.
This isn't Sunday school, Epstein. This isn't pass or fail. This is dead shit we're talking about. Why in hell did you put back money you knew you didn't take?
Because I knew you did. I saw you take it. I think inventing a crime that didn't exist to enforce your theories of discipline is Neanderthal in its conception.
You might be the first man to reach Berlin, Epstein, because I'm sending you in before everyone. Men do not face enemy machine guns because they've been treated with kindness. I don't want them human. I want them obedient. I'm trying to save those boys' lives, you crawling bookworm. Stand in my way, I'll pulverize you into chicken droppings.
You will
very
laugh.
watchable. Yes,
it's very funny, but it won't make you. It will not pull your heart the way the play does.
If they kept that original ending and kept most of what they have in there, but
it was so much more plausible too.
Yeah. It would have been more of a gut punch like in the movie when you watch that because, even though some of them are cretins, you still kind of like them. I mean, they're going to do a tough job.
Young men, they're
right.
they're teenagers probably still. Of course they're farting and burping and smelling and all of that. Yeah, I don't get it. So for me, I have to say, even though I never saw the original play, I'm going to give it to the play.
Yeah, I'm going to give it too. But I'm going to.
Although I do like this movie.
It's do like this movie.
It's worth watching.
I don't think
I'm not going to poop on it like Siskel and Ebert did.
And we should say that Gene Saks was one of the producers and who's also a director, and sent a note to like the press, like Variety and other places, basically scolding them for their criticism of this movie, and we're going to ban them from future productions. And
I think it did rather well, though, didn't it?
It's a big success. Yeah. So it was the budget was 20 million. The box office was 51 million. Also, just the VHS of this movie. I mean, when this came out, also on HBO, and it's always on TV in the 90s. I mean, it was
it was on TV so much.
And I think a lot of that also is Christopher Walken. I don't think we met. I mean, Walken is really good in this part. His Toomey,
he's spectacular.
Did you hear what I said? Epstein? Your insignificant presence is requested in my chambers.
You okay, Sarge?
Get out of here, Jerome, before I start hating you again. If I kill the both of you, they can still only hang me once. Let's go, Epstein. We got some bills to pay up, you and I. You and me. Move your ass, honey.
You don't want to do this, Sarge?
But I do. I really, really do.
It's all right, Jane. No, it isn't.
Unless you want to write in your memoirs that you're dead, I'd move out if I were Eugene, buddy. Epstein, let's go.
Yeah, his Toomey, I love. His Toomey's not a shouty, burly. Often this role is played by just a big gorilla shouting at people. His Toomey he has something. There's something in there that cares about these guys. He really cares about them. He's proud of them. In fact, the fact that they get the passes, that they get these weekend passes, and that's because Toomey recommended them for that, because he's proud of them. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it's a real interesting book versus movie. I would recommend if you got that Audible version, if you listen to the play, because there's certain jokes and stuff that they don't have in the movie, and the movie's PG-13. You can say a lot more. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get the choices. Don't understand.
Yeah.
You have a good movie.
Yeah.
Why would you? Why?
You had good material.
I don't get it.
Why would you change it so much for the script? I think you could have. Yeah.
I don't know.
But somebody made those choices. And
yeah. Well, it's just like when we were talking about, speaking of Vietnam, when we talked many years ago, for those of you who haven't been with us that long, we did Forrest Gump. Mm-hmm. If you've never read the book, the message of the book is the opposite of the message of the movie.
The book is bananas.
It's a very, I don't understand the same thing of okay, why did you took this book and then you just completely turned the message, you did a 180, and it's a big hit. So yeah. But it's it is totally worth seeing. It's very funny. These performances, every single one of them. I love Daisy. I love Rowena. I love every single one of those guys. Hennessy. When Hennessy gets in the Jeep and they're driving away. Oh.
And when they're doing the bet scene that I
love the bet scene.
When they're just talking about I'm gonna get 7 million heiresses to give me $1 million each.
Okay.
Well, that's why I need 10 days. It's just and then Arnold is brilliant. Says I remember the first time when I watched this in the movie theater when he goes, I want him to do 200 push-ups. And the whole audience oh, that's brilliant. But because Arnold's brilliant.
Yeah, super good. Now, we've had a lot of discussion about what we're going to do next. And I think we have a pretty interesting choice. Something that people have asked us about for a long, long time. We're going to be doing Casablanca. But here's the thing. Casablanca is based on, remind me again what the title of the play is.
It's Everybody Comes to Rick's.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm bringing that up.
It was never produced. So you probably haven't seen it on stage. We've never read it, so we're very excited to see what the differences are. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about Casablanca.
Yeah, so it's Everybody Comes to Rick's,
that movie.
And it's Joan Allison and Marie Burnett, were the writers. It's kind of hard to get your hands on, but if you deep dive into the internet, you can find it. There's a few PDFs that are out there that are free. It's about 100 pages, so it's your standard size play. I'm very interested. I've seen the movie a dozen times, so I'm interested to hear what the original play, what it sounded like, and what they changed and what they kept. It was produced eventually, by the way. It was started being produced in the 90s. So one of them was still alive, to mention it, and had some stuff to say.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, as you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Alrighty. That's going to be our next episode. Please reach out to us in all those places I mentioned at the top of the show for your ideas for books and movies or plays and movies, or you know how it goes by now. And Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all of my social media callouts are at She's Not Your Mama. And where can they find you?
You can find me at Brooklyn Fitchick for Twitter and Instagram. My site is brooklynfitchick.com, and I'm on TikTok at Margot Donahue. Once again, thank you for listening, and we will be back soon with a new episode.